There is one weed in your garden that fights back. You brush against it, and a hot sting spreads across your skin. It burns, it itches, and it lingers for hours afterward. So you pull on gloves and tear it out with a vengeance. The stinging nettle is the one weed almost everyone hates. But that plant is not attacking you out of spite. It has one of the most ingenious defenses in all of nature. And behind that sting hides something truly extraordinary. It is a food, a free fertilizer, and a butterfly nursery. It even tells you a secret about the ground it grows in. Today, you'll learn what your nettles are really saying, and you may never look at that stinging patch the same way. Welcome back to What the Garden Knows, where your yard has been speaking and we finally learn to listen. Let's begin with the sting itself, because it is remarkable. Look very closely at a single nettle leaf and at its green stem. You will see that both are covered in fine, pale, silvery little hairs. And every single one of those innocent little hairs is a tiny weapon. Each and every hair is a slender, hollow little tube made of pure silica. And silica is the very same material that ordinary window glass is made from. So the nettle grows many thousands of tiny glass needles all over itself. The tip of each little needle is sealed shut, and it is extremely brittle. So when your bare skin brushes past it, that fragile tip snaps clean off. And it leaves behind a sharp, open, angled point, just like a broken syringe. That broken point then slides painlessly straight into the surface of your skin. And then the plant squeezes its burning, stinging chemicals right down the hollow tube. They flood in beneath your skin, and the hot burning begins almost at once. It is a tiny hypodermic needle grown by a plant thousands upon thousands of times over. Once you know that, the sting feels less like spite and more like genius. It is one of the cleverest defenses in the whole of the plant world. But why would a humble plant ever go to such trouble? The answer opens up everything else that this plant hides. If nettles grow in your garden too, tell me about it in the comments. And do consider subscribing, because this plant is full of surprises. The first secret is that the sting is a shield, not a weapon. The nettle has no thorns at all, and it holds no bitter poison inside its leaves. Its leaves are soft, tender, and, to a hungry animal, genuinely good to eat. And that is precisely the problem for the nettle. Because deer, rabbits, and hungry cattle would all happily strip it completely bare. A soft and nutritious plant like that would never survive out in the open at all. So the nettle grew itself a coat of glass needles instead. It could not run and it could not hide, so it learned to sting. And any animal that takes even one careless mouthful never forgets it. They learn the lesson quickly and they leave the nettle alone. One brush of the muzzle is a lesson no animal ever forgets. And that is exactly why nettles grow so wonderfully thick and so tall. They stand there in dense green stands that almost nothing ever dares to touch. It is not aggression at all, and it is most certainly not malice. It is simply a soft, defenseless little plant that somehow learned to protect itself. And it protects itself so well that it thrives almost everywhere. Look at any wild corner, and the nettles are standing untouched. The second secret is that the sting has an off switch. Because this stinging plant is a genuinely wonderful food. For many thousands of years, people have gathered and eaten nettles gladly. They gathered the young spring tops back when the leaves were still soft and tender. And they simply cooked them, and the fearsome sting vanished away completely. A little heat destroys those tiny glass needles and all of their chemicals entirely. So cooked nettles are entirely safe to eat, and they cannot sting you at all. They taste rather like spinach, deep and green and surprisingly rich. People made nettle soup, nettle tea, and even nettle pudding for many centuries. In Hungry Springs, they were the first fresh green food available. Long before the garden had anything to give, the nettles were up. And a humble nettle is far richer in goodness than most vegetables you can buy. It carries plenty of iron, calcium, and a great deal of protein for a mere leaf. Please do wear good gloves to gather them, and only ever pick the young spring tops. And do be quite certain of the plant itself before you ever eat any of it. But cooked well, that fearsome weed becomes a nourishing meal. A plant that stings you raw will gladly feed you cooked. If this stinging plant is surprising you already, take a quick moment and tap that like button for me. It truly helps these forgotten garden secrets reach more curious people. The third secret is that nettles are quietly reading your soil. Because this plant does not grow in just any patch of ground. Nettles are famously hungry plants, and they crave one thing above all others. They want a soil that is deep, rich, damp, and heavy with nitrogen. And nitrogen is the very nutrient that makes green plants grow lush and strong. So wherever you find nettles growing thickly, the ground below them is deeply fertile. It is very often the richest patch of soil anywhere in your whole garden. That is why you always find them beside the compost heap and the old manure pile, and why they crowd into the ditch where all the rich water gathers and sits. Now here is where it becomes genuinely fascinating. Nettles quietly love the ground where people and their animals once lived. Around old barns, ruined cottages, and long-abandoned farmyards, they simply flourish. All those long years of waste quietly enriched the soil beneath them. So a thick patch of nettles can mark where a home once stood, a green scar left behind by people who lived there long ago. Archaeologists have long known to watch carefully for them. Your nettles are quietly telling you the history of your ground. They remember the barns and the beasts long after the walls have gone. So they defend themselves, they feed you, and they read your soil. But the next secret is the gift they hand back to your garden. The fourth secret is that nettles make a free and powerful fertilizer. Remember, they are busy drinking up all of that rich nitrogen from the soil. So their green leaves are absolutely packed with all the goodness that plants crave. And gardeners have used that fact for a very long time. They would simply cut down a great armful of fresh, green growing nettles. They would cram them all into a bucket and cover the lot with water. Then they simply leave it all to steep quietly for a couple of weeks. What comes out is a dark liquid, and it smells absolutely dreadful. There is no polite way to say it. The smell is truly appalling. But that foul-smelling brew is a rich and completely free liquid plant food. You water it down well with clean water, and you feed it to your hungriest plants. Tomatoes, cabbages, and hungry leafy greens all thrive beautifully upon it. It costs you nothing at all but a little patience. The nettle quietly draws all that goodness up out of the ground for you, and then it hands that goodness straight back to your garden. So the weed you are pulling out was really free fertilizer. It was working for you the whole time, and you never knew. The fifth secret is the one that may change your mind entirely, because a patch of nettles is a nursery for butterflies. Several of our very loveliest butterflies depend entirely upon this one plant. Their hungry caterpillars will eat nettle leaves, and very often nothing else at all. The small tortoise shell, the peacock, and the red admiral all need it dearly. The female butterfly carefully hunts out a sunny, thriving patch of young nettles, and she carefully lays her tiny eggs on the underside of the young leaves. When they hatch, the caterpillars feed safely inside that stinging fortress, and no hungry deer or rabbit will ever wander in there to disturb them. The very sting that you hate is what keeps those caterpillars safe. The plant guards them as fiercely as it guards itself. And in time, they emerge as the butterflies you love to watch. So if you clear away every last nettle from your garden, you may quietly be taking away the butterflies as well. Many other creatures shelter in there too, from ladybugs to countless tiny insects. A nettle patch is one of the busiest wildlife havens you can have. All that life sheltering behind a wall of tiny glass needles. The sixth secret is how deeply this plant is woven into our past. Because the nettle was once far more than a weed to us. Hidden beneath its sting, the nettle stem is full of long, strong, silky fibers. And people long ago learned to strip those fibers out and to spin them into thread. From that thread, they wove a fine, strong cloth called nettle linen. And it was used for bed sheets, for sails, for sacking, and for everyday clothing. In the First World War, when cotton grew scarce, nettles were harvested. Their tough fiber went into the cloth for uniforms and military equipment. The plant was also brewed as a spring tonic and used to make a green dye. It fed the poor and it clothed them for hundreds of years. Few plants have ever served people quite so faithfully. Ancient nettle cloth has even been found in old burial sites. So this stinging weed once helped hold our whole world together. And nearly all of us have completely forgotten that it ever did. We call it a weed now, and we tear it from the ground. We've uncovered so much hidden inside that stinging green patch. But the final secret is the most wonderful of them all. Here is the seventh and most beautiful secret of the nettle. Stand back for a moment and look at that patch again. You once saw only an aggressive, spiteful, useless weed to be destroyed. Now look at what is actually standing there in front of you. A soft and defenseless plant that quietly grew its own armor of glass. A wild green food that has fed people through 1,000 long, hungry springs. A living green map showing you exactly where your soil is at its richest. A free fertilizer drawing goodness up for your other plants. A well-guarded nursery where butterflies raise their young in perfect safety. And a plant that once clothed and fed whole generations of people. It asks for nothing at all, and it gives back a great deal. It only asks that you touch it with a little more respect, and perhaps that you finally see it for what it truly is. So the next time you find that stinging patch in a corner, do not reach immediately for the gloves and the shears. Perhaps leave just a little of it standing in a quiet, sunny place. Let the butterflies come to it, and let their caterpillars feed there in peace. That fierce green plant is one of the great gifts of your garden, and that is what your garden has been trying to tell you all along. So the next time a nettle brushes your skin and stings, remember the ingenious, generous plant standing behind that sting. A shield of glass, a meal, a fertilizer, and a butterfly nursery. Wear your gloves and let a patch of it grow wild for the wildlife. If this changed the way you see your garden, subscribe to What the Garden Knows. Every single week, we learn to read one more secret hidden in plain sight. And if you love the wild lives that fill your yard, check out Backyard Wildlife Mind. It's where we explore all the creatures living just outside your window. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, your garden is always speaking.